Warning! This episode contains some strong language. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Tales from the Trunk, reading the stories that didn't make it. I'm Hilary B. Bisnieks. Listeners, it is my absolute delight to welcome today a writer who I've been admiring from afar for, years, I don't know, time is fake, and now can admire from up close, Meg Elison. Meg, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm good to be here.
Absolutely. Listeners who are somehow unaware of Meg should rectify that. But I remember fairly recently, being last year, that you and I shared the table of contents in Gailey's Stone Soup cookbook with your absolutely excellent ode to a grocery store deli sandwich.
Very kind of you to remember. Yeah, I was very proud to be part of Gailey Stone's Soup series. And there were so many good essays in that about the way food takes you away and food takes you home, and food is something to be shared and something that you sometimes hold on to for yourself. And if you haven't checked it out, it's on their
Yeah,
website, and you should.
you should. I cannot believe how many amazing people were in that. It was just I haven't been published many times, and every time I am, I'm sharing the pages with incredible people. But to be sharing it with you, with Xing and Core, with like Hector Gonzalez, everybody in that was
Amal and
incredible.
Altar. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's something of a compliment to find yourself in the company of writers who you really admire and to
yeah.
think, I'm
Lucy
just
Bellwood.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
And you think I'm just like them. I'm as good as them. Here I am with
yeah.
them. It's always made my day to think about it.
It's so wild. It's so good. Writing is good. Actually, doing art is important.
Doing art's the only thing I know that stays good no matter what.
Yeah. Uh, Speaking of doing art, you're going to be reading to us from Hemet. Is there anything we should know before we get into that reading?
A little bit. So I kind of wanted to prep the audience by saying that Hemet is a real town. It is in the middle of California's Inland Empire, which is
Oh,
a long stretch of nothing in between Los Angeles and San Diego. It's largely agricultural, it's mostly forgotten, and it behaves in many ways like a much more conservative place than people think might exist in California.
mm-hmm. People who are
So,
not from California or
yeah,
don't live in California.
exactly. People who live in
Yeah,
California know that there's those long stretches of limited access within it, but people who aren't from there just picture beaches. So
yeah.
what I'm talking about is very inland, very isolated, 45 minutes from the nearest freeway, and and sort of left behind by the world
Mm-hmm.
in many ways. So it is a strange place that is strange to explain, and there's not much I can tell you except that I have to take you there. I have to show you.
Fabulous. Well, I'm looking forward to getting into it.
All right, this is chapter one of a novel that, when it was trunked, was titled Hemet, which is the name of the town. Once upon a time, I lived in a cursed valley beneath a mountain haunted by an imprisoned god. I had to die to escape. I wasn't the only one. By the time I got out of Hemet, I had lost count of the number of sacrifices we had made to that god whose name I will not say. I know you'll think it's ridiculous that I won't say it out loud when it's everywhere. It was the name of the high school yearbook every year. It was the name of the rival high school across town. No, not the one on the edge of the desert that looks like a prison, the other one. The one that made their mascot the Titans. What a monumentally stupid idea. The curse isn't a secret. Everybody knows it, but nobody knows it all. Even I don't, and I've seen more than most. I know I saw too much to ever say its name again. to let people in the dusty, double-damned valley name their nail salons and real estate shops after him. There's no saving those people. We tried to break the curse. We only succeeded in breaking it for ourselves and at a terrible cost. If you had told me I would go back one day of my own free will, I'd call you a liar. Once upon a time, I'd have done anything to never think about the name of the town of Hemet again. But that's how the curse works. It always finds a way to call you home. Once I explain this to you, you'll understand why I have to go back. You'll understand why I had to die to escape twice. You might not get why so many others had to die too. That's okay. I don't understand that part either. You probably won't be able to forgive me. I don't forgive me either. But I'm the only one left who can tell you this. It's already dark, and we only have tonight. So let's begin. Memento mori. What? You are invited to celebrate death, and remember that you too will die. Where? The Vault on Sanderson Street, Hemet, California. When? Saturday the 13th, 10 p.m. until burial. Who? The deceased will be Bathory Korvitz, CSU San Marcos, Leontine Olson, Princeton, Seamus O'Brien, UCLA, and Heckeby Yates, Berkeley. Where? Black. R.I.P. Melanie Matthias, CSU Northridge. What if people don't know where the vault is? Lala was looking over the invite to make sure everything was correct. Shouldn't we list the actual address? If you click on the location, it opens the map, Heck said, distractedly trying to make the graphics line up with the text. Are you sure you want your full name on here? Leontine? Leo scoffed. You put your full name. Heck shrugged. It's a funeral. You're supposed to be formal. Me too. What about Batty, though? That's not her real name. It's real. We call her that. Heck finally got the frame right and saved a new version of the invite in the correct format. Leo rolled her eyes. Legal name. You know what I mean. It'll be her legal name as soon as she can change it. I think we ought to use the name everybody knows her by. If we put down Caroline Crowe, no one's going to know who that is. Even her school ID says Bathory. Okay, Leo muttered. She bit her lip where Heck couldn't see her, but Heck caught it in the reflection of the monitor. Do you really think this will work? Heck shrugged. It worked for Melanie. There was nothing to say to that. All the graduation parties were that week, but almost none were on Sunday. They had chosen Sunday for that reason. They knew they needed a crowd to make this work, and they didn't want to compete with some of the bigger ones that had a pool or a band. They had an empty garage, a modest pizza budget, and desperation. That was it. On the day of the party, everyone showed up at Leo's early. Batty was clearly hungover, smoking a clove cigarette as she hung up black streamers and paper bunting. Heck was nervous at her computer, making the funeral portrait poster for everybody to see. Leo was running interference between her friends and her parents, making sure the former didn't curse too much and the latter didn't overreach the responsibility of paying for pizza and soda into the territory of concern with what the party was all about. She almost succeeded. Around noon, Leo's mother, Junie, appeared in the garage. They had the space mostly ready. They set up all the folding tables they'd been able to borrow from Junie's church, spreading them with black tablecloths and everything they could find. When they ran out, they cut up black trash bags into open rectangles. They had just begun to weigh down the crinkly flyaway plastic when Junie rounded the corner carrying a large tray. I thought you kids might be hungry, Junie chirped, shouldering aside the mesh screen that hung over the mouth of the garage to keep out bugs. It made you a little something. Leo didn't groan out loud, but it was a near thing. We're fine though, Mom. Junie pursed her lips. It's just sandwiches and melon. There's a case of water in the garage fridge for you. Thank you, Mrs. Olson, Batty said sweetly. She could charm the gold fillings out of anybody's parents but her own. Junie smiled. Please call me Mother Junie. It's what all the kids call me. Betty smiled, fangs showing in her ombre black and dark red lipstick. Mother Junie, I wondered what they call you since you can't be Father Junie. Junie's smile faltered a little and she busied herself setting down the tray and laying out plates. These are all vegan, she said, since I know you kids won't eat anything to cast a shadow. Cucumber, yogurt butter, peanut butter and jelly, Nutella and banana, all that good stuff, just to keep you going. Thanks, Mom. Leo was fighting the impulse to turn her mother back and shove her out of the garage. It's really nice of you to do that. Oh, it's my pleasure, Junie said, reading the room and turning to go. She ran straight into Heck, fresh from the printer upstairs. The photo was huge and glossy, almost 2 feet on either side. Heck tried to hold it against her, but there was nowhere to hide. Did you kids use my photo printer? Leo grimaced. Yeah, Mom, you said we could. I didn't think you'd mind. I said you could for school projects, Leontine. She sighed. I'm sure it's fine. Did you make a party poster? Heck nodded, but didn't turn it around. Well, let's see it. Come on. Junie's tone was jovial, but the implication was clear. Leo turned to Heck. There was no avoiding this. She was going to see it sooner or later. Trying to act casual, Heck turned the huge photo around. It showed each of their senior portraits in oval frames rendered in black and white. The four of them were squared at the top under the legend "In Loving Memory" typed out in Gothic lettering. Beneath them, Melanie's portrait loomed alone and centered, separate from everybody else but styled the same way. And at the bottom, "Memento Mori" floated above a device of Death in the Maiden, lifted from an online material that had come bundled with their AP art history textbook. Heck was pleased to see so many high quality artworks she could borrow from that otherwise useless collection of digital add ons. Junie's face fell at once as her face raked over the pictures. Her eyes fastened on Leo's demure portrait in a boat neck black dress and a string of her grandmother's pearls. Junie had done Leo's hair that day, carefully finger waving what length her daughter had left on top of an undercut
Hmm.
to make it appear as though she'd only bobbed her silky blonde hair rather than shaving it. The black and white printing made the picture impossible to date. Had this girl graduated in 2016 or 1956? Junie stared at her Leo's gray eyes and her gray face. What's the meaning of this? Junie didn't look up at Heck. She looked down at the picture. Leo stepped toward her mother. Mom, don't get upset. Junie wheeled around. I know, it was hard on you kids to lose Melanie. It's always hard to deal with death.
Hmm.
But why would you make it look like you all died too? Can you imagine if Melanie's mom saw this? What are her friends going to think? What are your friends going to think? This just looks. She looked around at each of the girls, her hands grasping upward in the air as she searched for the word. Cruel.
Hmm.
Betty flicked her lit clove out of the garage and into the dirt beside the driveway. It's not like that, Mother Junie. We were just trying to honor Melanie by remembering that we all die. Life is short, you know? Heck, following Batty's lead as always, dove in. Yeah, there's all those medieval designs called memento moris, where it's supposed to remind you as you commune with the dead that you'll be one of them one day, and that you need to make the most of being alive while you can. That's the theme of the party, Mom. Theo gestured around to the garage, now fully draped in black and decorated with vases full of plastic black roses and Halloween tombstones pulled from a dozen houses. You get it? We all need to live as hard as we can for as long as we can because life is short. Melanie proved that. Junie's face was sour as she took in her garage. I don't like this, she said at length. I thought I was going to have to talk you kids out of drinking or smoking weed. I don't even know what to make of. Her hands flopped down at her side. This, Leo sighed. I know you don't, Mom, but this isn't going to hurt anybody. We're all still getting used to the fact that Melanie's gone. We're processing. We really need to feel our feelings, you know?
Hmm.
She used a phrase that she knew for certain Junie had picked up from her therapist. Junie recognized an unsubtle attempt at manipulation from a beginner, and she winced. I don't think that's what's happening here, she said. Heck walked over to the easel that held the black poster board where the photo was to be mounted for the party. It sat on a narrow table at the far side of the garage, spread with one of the good black tablecloths they'd requisitioned. It had come from Betty's grandmother's house, and it had to be used backwards because the front side featured the word joy worked in gold embroidery thread. Without that, no one could tell it was a Christmas cloth. We're all saying goodbye to the versions of ourselves that lived here, Heck said softly as she mounted the photo on the backing. We're all going to go away to college and become someone new.
Hmm.
Just like you did, Mother Junie. Remember when you were talking to me about how much Berkeley changed you? That's why I applied there. I'm ready to do all that growing up you said you did. So I have to leave my old self behind.
Hmm.
That's all. Junie softened, and Leo and Betty exchanged a look. Junie had wanted them all to go to Berkeley together. She hated that her own daughter had chosen Princeton instead. If anything was going to work on her, it was this. Junie sighed and put a hand on Heck's cheek. You kids are so dramatic about everything, she said in a soft voice. I try to understand it, I really do. I just don't like the idea of any of you being in Melanie's place right now.
Hmm.
Heck swallowed, thinking that last time she had seen her friend. Me neither, she said through a thick throat. It's complicated. I don't want to be like her, but I will someday. I have to get used to all these little endings. We all do. How very Catholic, Junie mused. Leo and Betty nodded. They had her. Betty crossed the concrete floor and helped herself to a handful of melon balls. These cucumber sandwiches are so perfect and neat, she said, piling food on a plate. Leo, will you get us all water bottles? Do you want to sit and join us for lunch? Heck asked Junie. Leo gave Heck the look of death. Junie smiled. Maybe I From the driveway came the sound of a skateboard clacking over the seams in the cement of the sidewalk. Seamus appeared dimly through the bug mesh, kicking his board up next to his hand and loping up the driveway. Sorry I'm late, but it's done, he said, panting a little. Leo, Batty, and Heck all gestured to him subtly but firmly to stop. Stop talking, stop moving, to pay attention and not do this in front of Junie. Seamus missed every one of their signals. He pushed his backpack off his shoulder to pull it over his belly. The top of the zipper wouldn't close, but he'd only tightened it around the object that had held it distended and open. He pulled with both hands, and a baby-sized black coffin slid out. It was good work for a beginner. The joints were flush, and it had that classic coffin shape, one associated with vampires and haunted houses. He set it down on the table next to their sandwiches. He flipped open the lid with his long fingers. See, I lined the inside with that purple satin that Batty gave me, and the lid has this little stick that keeps it open, like the hood of a car. That'll get us through the funeral. It closes tight, too. Plus, there's this little pocket for the... He looked up and stopped. He finally got the hint. Silence sat with them in the ringing echo of the empty garage with a metal door overhead. The heat was already uncomfortable. It was a clear morning in June. Outside, a mourning dove gave its call. Seamus flipped the lid closed. I made it for the theme of the party, he said pathetically, trying not to look and see if Junie bought it. It goes with the, everything. The theme. Junie backed away from the table, holding a sandwich. I'll let you kids get to it. Nice to see you, Seamus. Seamus mumbled something in return. When Junie was gone, Leo huffed a sigh and took the coffin from his hand. Idiot, she said. What? He bawled, following her over. She's got to find out. Everybody's going to post pictures. Plus, she's going to be right there in the house the whole time. We should have just gone with my idea and told her it was a costume party. Oh, sure, Batty said, a costume party with no superheroes and no slutty cheerleaders. Just a bunch of kids in black. With a coffin. You're an idiot. She's right. Seamus huffed. Isn't anybody going to tell me how good this thing looks? That is good. Heck smiled. It is good. Seamus backed away a little shyly. Hey, Heck, the pictures look great too. So did the invite. Heck looked away, tucking her hair behind her ear unnecessarily. What's left to get done? Betty asked. Nothing, really. Leo looked up and saw the whole place. Looked about right. I'm going to go to the store for dry ice so when we get closer it doesn't get all melt. That'll help us cool down after sunset. And it'll look haunted as fuck, Betty added. I'm going to go get dressed. Because that'll take all day, Heck said dryly. Betty cast an eye over Heck and the shorter girl blushed. Heck, I'm going to do your makeup too. Heck riveted to the spot. Okay, she said in a very small voice. I'm wearing this, Seamus said, gesturing to his black jeans and black t-shirt. You need eyeliner, Leo said with a critical voice as someone who knows what everyone needs to do to improve. Seamus grinned. Are you going to hook me up? Leo grinned back. Yeah, but wait till later. You'll fuck it up if I do it before then. He glanced around. Things are pretty much ready. You want to play some? Seamus popped his chin toward Leo's bedroom on the second floor of the house. Sure, she said, grinning. Heck and Batty exchanged a look. They split in two and two after eating, and the afternoon passed. And that's where we'll stop.
Oh, gosh. I nostalgia sniped myself earlier. I don't know how I did it. I was looking at Wikipedia, and you know how when you're looking at Wikipedia and then Wikipedia keeps on being Wikipedia, and then
oh yeah,
and then you find yourself. I don't know how I made my way over to it, but I eventually found myself like there are pictures of my old neighborhood on Wikipedia and like major landmarks of that area, and I was just like, looking at pictures of these buildings and being like, I know what it feels like to, like, I know where the cracks are on this sidewalk. And
the end of the past is a foreign country, but you can definitely get postcards from there.
Absolutely. And these kids being the overwrought, goth-ass little punks that they are, just like so strongly reminded me of the goth-ass little punk that I was.
I was very much that kind of kid. This was written from my friend group at that age, no question.
Oh, gosh. So obviously this is a trunked novel. I'd love to hear a little bit about sort of the process of inspiration behind it and then the eventual come down from that?
It was a combination of two things. One thing was the curse on my hometown, which is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
There is an urban legend that was somewhat bastardized from a myth belonging to the indigenous people of that valley that sort of
Oh,
got handed to us through a series of dubious custodies,
right,
including
sure.
Louis L'Amour, who wrote a book about the same valley, who wrote a book about the same god back when he was active in the business.
Mm-hmm.
So it was half that, and it was half I wanted to write a story like it. I wanted to write a story about a group of kids that made a pact that had done some monstrous thing and would be dragged back to it around the time of their 20th high school reunion to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ooh. Oh. And I am just coming up on my 20th high school reunion
My
in
condolences.
not too long. I am not going. I am simply not going. That
Well,
is on the other side of the country.
they hardly happen anymore. Like most people just keep track of each other online if they want to know anything.
Yeah.
And, mercifully, mine would have happened during the pandemic, so nothing happened at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my 10th college happened during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and it was that exact same thing. Um, yeah, what you were saying about, wanting to write about your hometown, wanting to write about your hometown, the the way that that was like just from the very opening was so rooted in place was I think really like you know we can trunk a thing for any number of reasons, but it's always I think one of the things I try to do with this show is say like, oh, there's still valuable stuff in there, and like that rootedness in place, like I really felt like, oh, I understand a bit of this right now. A lot of like in the same way that your uh, supermarket deli essay also was like just so rooted in a time and place. Um,
That is one of my favorite things about good writing is that it makes me feel like I'm there. And
mm-hmm,
if I've been reading for a little while and I feel like I have to come up for air, I know it's been working because I'm not where I thought I was. I'm snorkeling at least, a few feet deep.
for sure. Um, can you talk a little bit about, because obviously you don't only write about places that you've been, but can you talk a little bit about the things that you use to bring that same energy to writing about a completely foreign or a completely invented place?
I try to think of what is incidental and at the same time indispensable.
Mm,
So there are lots of features of a place that we take for granted because they belong there and because they're necessary to live there, but they're
mm-hmm.
also indispensable. And if you think about the ones that you've known to be indispensable, like the kids in my story have to have a bug net because they're opening up the garage door, and there are some places where the
Mm-hmm.
bugs. I mean, I live in New York now, and aside from a couple of months of mosquitoes, there's not really much of a bug problem. I haven't seen ants since I moved here, which seems like a
That
total
seems
revelation.
weird.
Yeah, because I moved from the West Coast, which is a solid anthill from end to end.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about those incidental necessities, even if you don't know the ones about the places you're going, you know them about the places you've been, so you know where to look. So you start thinking
Mm-hmm.
about what are the things that I could not live without if I lived there. And then from there, it's a Baroque structure of eavesdropping, checking Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best tools I've discovered for writing about places where I have not lived has been Google Earth. Because you
Mm-hmm.
can look at the street level, like you can put yourself in the middle of an intersection and look around and ask myself, if I was doing laundry at this laundromat, could I walk to a place that had donuts?
Mm.
And that's the kind of thing that makes it sound like you know exactly where you are and will be very familiar to somebody who knows the area. Whereas if you just made it up and you said I walked for egg rolls, someone might be like, where? But if you're
Right.
crawling across Google Maps, it'll show you what you can find. And I used that extensively for my first novel because I had to write about somebody riding a bike across Utah, and that's not a thing I've
Mm-hmm.
ever done.
Yeah. Yeah, the something that I end up thinking about a lot is the way that um so I went to college for creative writing, and uh I think that my program did a pretty good job sort of across the spectrum of the classes that I took in
Hmm.
emphasizing the really multi many disciplines. Got there eventually, nailed it. Uh, that are required, but it sometimes within a single class, it could sometimes feel like the only part of writing is writing itself, and that it took, stepping back and being at a liberal arts school and taking, having a liberal arts education that is spread across, you know every field that the college offered pretty much, to say, actually all of this is vastly important, and like, not just the close reading that I picked up from writing programs or from writing classes, not just the like analytical reading I picked up from literature classes, but like the the thinking about place from a geography global studies class, the thinking about how people's brains work from a psychology class, like all those things come together in a way that it's so easy to forget that. And I think that's something that to harp on one of my favorite topics, fan fiction.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that's something that fan fiction writers are very good at a lot of the time, because there is so much there's already so much there, even if you're doing a wild AU version of your story. Like, there is so much stuff built already that, the whatever the media property is has informed you about, that you don't even think that you have to go look on, media property version of Google Earth or whatever.
Right. I think that fanfic writers are in a somewhat unique position because they're writing for people who loved a world so much that they couldn't leave it when the material ceased. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go back to that world. So you have to be very good at reproducing world, which is a problem that really only authors deep in a series usually have to contend with. So yeah, they bring incredible sense of place and of culture because they know that's what people are showing up for. Like, yeah, they want the characters, yeah, they want the slash, but more than anything, they want to be back in the world that they knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I am for like a year and a half now, have been just deep in the Murderbot fandom, and it is exactly what you're saying there.
And Martha Wells is very good at it. She's a very competent world builder and she's capable of inducing you to seeing something in very few words. She has great economy of line.
Mm-hmm.
I admire her a great deal. I
Yeah.
also like that Martha Wells' life experience filters into the work quite a bit. You know, a lot of times writers have day jobs, writers
Mm-hmm.
have kids, like writers learn stuff about life in places other than creative writing programs. And that all comes into the work too. I mean, having worked retail for as many years as I have informs the way I write. It informs the way I put people together under strained circumstances. It's
Yeah.
all valuable if you know how to use it.
Yeah. I was gonna say, the way the way that you write people who are under stress is a really incredible, like, I get a certain amount of sense of that from working in technology, but it is a very different way than like the way that you interact with the public.
Having had the dubious pleasure of interacting with the public as a bookseller, as a food service worker, as a retail employee, I have seen non-emergencies become emergencies because of people's inability to avoid placing their own projections on one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I've developed immense stress tolerance because of it. So I'm glad it comes through in the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that really comes back to what you were saying about like the believability is in observing things and in more than that in knowing what things to observe, which is like again it's that's the sort of thing I will say that the creative writing program I went through was very valuable to me. It taught me a lot of stuff, and also I am I could be the same level of writer I am today if I had not gone through that program. I would have a different lens behind things, but like, it's the I I think we haven't had a discourse in a while about like, do you have to do an MFA? Do you have to do, Clarion or whatever? But like, I think
You
it's
really don't.
you really, really don't. Like,
I have no MFA. I did not get my degree in creative writing. I've never done one of the major workshops. I mostly learned to write by reading and writing, which is a completely valid form of education on the subject.
yeah.
And that's still true for me, even though I have written 6 books. I have many published short stories. I have taught in college classes. I've taught at the BFA and the MFA level. It is simply not necessary. If you find it useful, and more than anything, if you can make the space in your life so that writing is your main focus for 2 years or however long you're in your program,
Mm-hmm.
that's a gift. Get it if you can get it by all means, but you do not need it. Do not let it hold you back.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, like, it is every single thing you do is informing the art that you make.
Absolutely, yes.
Um,
And I could list all day examples of some of the best writing that's ever been put down, written by people who did not think of themselves as writers,
mm-hmm.
who had experiences to share.
Yeah. I was getting in my feelings the other day. You
Mhm.
know how you do,
As every writer does,
and
yes.
found this beautiful quote from my own mother, who said this. I don't know how many years ago, more than 20,
Mhm.
but that I have just been turning over since I found it, which is. What I've come to realize is that all of us are artists in our own ways, and when life doesn't seem to make any sense at all, art helps to make the world whole. And,
That's very good.
like, I mean, obviously it spoke to me because it was like my mom said that, and also it was one of those things of like, she didn't, I think, particularly consider herself an artist, but like, what a powerful artist statement that is.
It really is. That's as good as any I've heard from somebody who's worked at it all their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and to touch back on this, like it really is. Uh, you don't have to do anything except write to be a writer.
Right. That's it. Writer's right. That's the verb.
That's the verb. We are a people of that verb.
Mhm.
We tell stories. We make art. That's us. We do it. We're good at it.
Right. Maybe you publish, maybe you don't, maybe it's good, maybe it's not, but if you write, you're a
Yeah.
writer. That's it.
Yeah. And whether you're writing fan fiction, whether you're writing overwrought lyrics in a journal that you're never going to show anybody, whatever you're writing, it's
Anything at
it's
all.
writing. It's good.
It all counts. Yep.
Yeah. Um. Gosh, I had a connecting thought and then it just vanished from my head.
I hate it when that happens.
It's it's been a week. I will say.
Mhm.
Um, no, it just really isn't there. Uh, so one of the one of the questions that I like to ask, and this is not connected in any way, but I'm
Sure.
going to go for it because you are a person who writes some spooky and ghoulish things once in a while,
I do,
maybe
yeah.
just a few. And speaking of artist statements, here we go. We've made a connection. I've done it. Uh,
There you go.
I am because I'm a person who has always liked, maybe not always, has for a long portion of my life liked the spooky, the macabre, the overwrought,
Yes.
and have a partner who extremely does not. I would love for your perspective on what draws you to writing the spooky shit, to reading the spooky shit, to watching the spooky shit, uh, because that's such a fascinating thing.
I too have a partner who does not like anything spooky or scary. So I've had to sit with this thought more than once.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's that my earliest memories of enjoying a book, of sitting down and really getting into something, really liking something, it was the spooky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the kinds of writing that elicit a physical response. And I mean a physical emotional response. Like you feel feelings in your guts, you feel chills, you feel
Yep.
kindled. And those are, I would say, the extremes of the art. Like you can write something that will literally make someone sick, or you write erotica that literally turns people on, or you write comedy that makes people laugh. You get a physiological response out of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I loved reading stories that made me have a physiological response. I didn't want to listen. I love thinking, but it's not my first choice.
Mood.
My first choice, I want to be transported into another frame of mind and I want to feel it in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And reliably, spooky stories gave me the physiological response that I was looking for. I literally felt scared.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not an anxious child, but I lived under difficult and uncertain conditions. And I felt almost like it was confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like validation. It felt like you're not imagining it. Things really are terribly scary. Here are some moments where someone might triumph under those circumstances.
Yeah.
And it might be that I was conditioned to it. It might be that I was just exposed to it first. But those are the books that made me feel something. So I kept coming back for more.
Yeah. And
So, of course, that's what I want to write.
yeah, absolutely. And to that point, like it is, in any we I like to turn to the like horror and erotica are two ends of the same spectrum, of both in terms of how they are treated as art and in terms of like the strength of response. You know, I've probably I've maybe read a book that made me laugh as hard as some random Tumblr post, but
A few. I can name a few. It's really hard to
it's
be funny.
really hard to be
It's
funny. I mean, it's also
it's a
really
lot
hard to be
easier.
sexy or scary.
I suppose it depends on your point of view.
Yeah,
I find it harder to be funny than any of the
yeah.
above.
But the for and I mean for comedy as well. Let's just make it a triangle. I don't know metaphors. Like
Sure.
all
Yes.
of them have at their heart the this essential core of a build up and a release. You build up
Yes.
to climax and then you
Tension.
climax.
Yeah, you build tension and then you break it. And I find, especially as I get older, I have little to no time for authors who want to be vague and suggest events or suggest emotions. Like there are a lot of authors in this group who I probably should not name because most of them are still living and that would not be
Mm-hmm.
kind. But I want tension to build and be released. I do not want to be petted to no
Mm-hmm.
end.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact the fact that life does not work like a story all the time. So we sometimes want life to work like a story. There are times when life ends up looking like a story anyway, but horror can give you that tension and release in a way that you don't necessarily get in your everyday life.
Hardly anything else builds to that much relief and then actually gives the relief that it
Yeah.
promises. Most of life is endless tension building or meaningless vague gesturing. And who wants that? I get plenty of that. I'm here for
Yeah.
something else.
And also especially we are listeners, you are hearing this in May. It is about to be June. That is our month. And as queer people, we experience a lot of things growing up and living in, especially living in the year of our Lord 2024. There's a lot happening.
A lot.
Um, and being able to find. I keep on coming back to the idea of finding an escape where bad things are going to happen, but you have a level of control over them.
You can
Yeah.
survive them. Also, I think horror might be uniquely appealing to queer people because we are often placed in situations where something is slightly not
Mm-hmm.
right, but no one can say it out loud. And everybody's experiencing fear and shame about whatever the
Yeah.
thing is. But you spend your whole life looking for clues, trying to put it together, trying to figure out what everybody's afraid of. And then you find out
Yep.
it's you. That's a
Yeah.
horror movie.
I was gonna say, you've read Camp Damascus, right? Of
Yes,
course,
of
yeah.
course.
The the being queer and being disabled, both, and the gosh, that's such a good book.
It's a very good book, and I would recommend to anybody who liked Camp Damascus and wants more of that to read The Honeys.
Yes.
Very similar vibes, very, I mean, comforting, building of tension and breaking of tension because everything that you think could go wrong is gonna
Mm-hmm.
go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, we have already mentioned Sarah Gailey several times. We will continue to mention Sarah Gailey, but
Just
just
Like
like
Home,
home,
The Echo Wife.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I couldn't read that book in anything but broad daylight.
Yeah, that one definitely sticks with you and very much on the theme of knowing something is slightly off all the time and fighting to find the
Yeah.
answer.
So I don't know. Some people say that it doesn't, like, the Zoom, noise canceling blocks this out. So I don't know if this came through, but this weird sound just happened in here in the room, the podcast room, and this blue police box appeared, and I'm wondering if we can take a step into this time machine and go back and offer some words of wisdom to past Meg Elison and, by extension, to writers, listeners listening to this show right now.
I always say yes to getting in the time machine. So if it's a weird little silver car, if it's a big blue box, if it's an open buggy with a 1920s time traveler in it, I'm into
Absolutely.
it. If I could go back and give myself some past advice, especially the version of me that was working on this book in
Mm-hmm.
2016, I would remind her that there is no such thing as wasted writing.
Yes.
Even even if you grind out 100,000 words of something that is ultimately unpublishable, that just does not work, the work you did was on
Mm-hmm.
you. It's not the book, it's you as a writer. There are many processes that you do not get better at without creating garbage in the first couple of
Mm-hmm.
rounds. My favorite metaphor is always that it's pancakes. Your first couple pancakes are ugly. They're too
Yep.
done on one side, they're too greasy on the other side. They might not be fit for anybody but the dog. But unless you make those first ugly pancakes, you never get to the good
Mm-hmm.
ones. No amount of writing is a waste. You are honing your instrument. You are creating your voice. You are discovering what you can do. Keep writing it. Keep putting up words. Keep putting up numbers. Eventually, you will be good enough to write what you really want
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah. I mean, that's so broadly applicable. It's I keep coming back to this idea, which, because I think it's a really good idea, that, you know, nothing you write is wasted, and that includes the ideas that you have that you might, you know, you might put a central idea into 8 or 9 things before you find the place where it's the right place at the right time.
Absolutely, yes. And I think if you look back at the careers of great writers, you see that they've
Mm-hmm.
done that. People tell the same story over and over. You're not going to get caught. You're not going to get called a hack. No one's going to notice because nobody's out here reading every single word you put down, probably not
Yeah.
even your mom. So just keep trying it and acting like it's new. No one will
Yeah.
know.
Maybe a scholar in 50 or 100 years, but like,
If you're lucky. If you're lucky, a scholar in 150 years will look back on your body of work and say, "Gosh, she was really obsessed with, these formations where people live in uh non-monogamous
mm-hmm,
households." You'll be dead by then. Who cares? Get away with it for as long as you can. Let it be a scholar's playful idea. Just keep writing the thing.
absolutely. And also to that point, like, act as though a scholar is going to be studying you someday. Don't throw any of your stuff out.
No, absolutely not. Hold on to your juvenilia. You can always get an external hard drive. Cloud space is cheap, although you can't
Yeah.
always count on it. Hold on to your old notebooks, take scans, take pictures, convert stuff to PDF, make it as durable as you can. Never give up on a piece. Even going back to this is eight
Mm-hmm.
years old, and I've barely looked at it. And opening it up again, I can see what's
Yeah.
redeemable in it. I can see what I might use one day. I might go back to something like this
Hell
idea
yeah.
one day. It is still mine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the 3-2-1 backup rule is extremely important. Uh, keep 3 copies of your data, have them on 2 different types of media, and have one of them be off-site, please.
Excellent. Excellent backup plan.
So, speaking of bodies of work,
Hmm.
do you have anything forthcoming, maybe a story in an anthology that you would love our listeners to know about?
I have two that I would love to share with you. The first is in a collection called Negative Creep from Bookslayer Press.
Mm.
They're a small independent trans-owned press, and Negative Creep is a collection of stories, each of which is based on a specific Nirvana song.
Oh,
I was so excited when I saw this call, I like tripped over myself trying to figure it out.
yeah.
So my story is based on the song Penny Royalty.
Hell yeah.
I cannot wait to see it in print. That's coming out in June. And then following, I think later in the summer, is an anthology of queer space stories called Amplitudes, which is being published by Lee Mandello. I
Mm.
have a story in that as well. And I don't want to give away the reveal, but my story is based on a song also, not a Nirvana song, but a different song that I thought was a great match for Gaze in Space.
Oh, fantastic. That is, there's so much good art always coming out. It's incredible. Finally, semi finally, uh, before we. Sorry, just 1 second. Ma'am. Ma'am, you know you're not supposed to eat receipts.
But they're crinkly and
They're
delicious.
crinkly and delicious, and it's 30 minutes until your food time, and therefore it is time to be a terrible little gremlin.
Yep, agitating.
Yep. Come on. Thank you. Um, speaking of bodies of work of other people's,
Mhm.
is there anything that you've been enjoying in the wider media landscape that you'd just love for our listeners to know about?
Absolutely, yes. I just read the audiobook of Dayspring by Anthony Oliveira.
Mm.
It is a retelling of the life of Christ, and it's focusing on the idea of Jesus having a human body.
Oh.
It is so good. It is part memoir, part poetry, part biblical exegesis. It's very gay, and it's a monumental achievement. I haven't read a book that good in years. I think everybody should read it, but especially if you're queer and you are raised Christian.
Fantastic. I am definitely going to be checking that out. That sounds incredible. Well, Meg, it has been such a pleasure having you on. Before we get going, very finally, where can our listeners find you elsewhere?
I'm Meg Elison on Blue Sky on Instagram, and you can always find out what I'm up to on megelison.com.
Fantastic. And of course, as always, listeners, links will be in the show notes. Meg, thank you so, so much for joining me. It has been such a delight.
Thanks for giving me an excuse to get back in my trunk. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Tales from the Trunk is mixed and produced in beautiful Oakland, California. Our theme music is Paper Wings by Lillian Boyd. You can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/trunkcast. All patrons of the show now get a sticker and logo button, along with show outtakes and other content that can't be found anywhere else. You can find the show on Blue Sky at Trunkcast, and I post at HBBisnieks. If you like the show, consider taking a moment to rate and review us on your preferred podcast platform. And remember, don't self-reject.